In the year 2184, humanity had grown accustomed to the stars, exploring farther and faster than ever before. Earth was no longer the solitary blue speck it once was, but a recognized player in a galaxy filled with advanced civilizations and ancient wonders. For Captain Eli Morgan, a seasoned officer of the United Earth Command, the thrill of discovery was second nature. Yet, when he received the assignment to act as Earth's representative in first contact talks with the ancient Lurillian race, he knew this was different. The Lurillians, an enigmatic species rumored to be as wise as they were mysterious, had made contact for the first time in thousands of years. Descriptions painted them as towering beings, standing 8 feet tall, with gleaming sapphire blue skin that shimmered like water under moonlight. Their people had mastered technologies humans could only dream of, yet they remained secluded, preferring isolation to alliance. The Lurillian Council's recent invitation to humanity, therefore, was nothing short of historic. Captain Morgan sat in his cabin aboard the United Earth cruiser Valiant Star, adjusting his formal dress uniform. Every detail had to be perfect. He was, after all, the face of humanity for this meeting. A thrill tinged with nervousness ran through him as he studied his reflection. At 36, he was regarded as one of the fleet's best, known for his diplomatic finesse and resilience in high-stakes negotiations. But no amount of past experience could ease the weight of this mission. Suddenly, a soft chime echoed in the cabin, and the calm voice of Lieutenant Harper, his trusted second-in-command, filled the room. "Captain, the Lurillian delegation ship has docked. They've requested our presence in the main diplomatic chamber." Taking a deep breath, Eli straightened his jacket one last time and stepped into the corridor, where Harper waited with a small team of diplomatic officers. They exchanged nods, silently acknowledging the importance of the moment. Together, they strode toward the chamber, anticipation thickening with each step. The doors slid open, revealing the vast, ornately designed diplomatic hall. The room was an impressive sight. High ceilings arched above, adorned with intricate carvings that glistened under soft blue lighting, creating an atmosphere both welcoming and ethereal. At the center stood the Lurillian representatives, their imposing forms cloaked in shimmering silver robes that seemed to ripple as they moved. Among them was a figure who immediately commanded Eli's attention, an 8-foot-tall Lurillian woman with a regal bearing and piercing violet eyes that seemed to look through him. Her name, he'd learned, was Kiera, Lurillian royalty and a warrior scholar renowned among her people. She was tasked with overseeing the union between their races, a gesture intended to symbolize trust and unity. However, the process required more than just symbolic rituals. It involved a Lurillian tradition known as the unity bond, a rare and intimate connection that blended both minds and spirits. It was an honor never before extended to another species. Eli knew this was a monumental test of humanity's worth in the eyes of the Lurillians. Eli stepped forward, his gaze locked with Kiera's. He offered a respectful nod, his voice calm and steady. "Princess Kiera, it's an honor to stand before you in the esteemed council of the Lurillian race. On behalf of Earth, we extend our hand in peace and partnership." Kiera's expression was unreadable as she regarded him, her gaze intense. When she spoke, her voice resonated deeply, layered with authority and wisdom. "Captain Morgan, Earth has shown remarkable growth. Your people have proven both resilient and resourceful. But the unity bond is a sacred tradition, not one taken lightly. Are you, a representative of Earth, prepared to undertake this bond and all that it entails?" Eli felt the weight of her words, understanding the gravity of her question. The unity bond was far from a mere diplomatic gesture. It required a profound vulnerability, a merging of minds and emotions, and the strength to confront truths that lay hidden even from oneself. To the Lurillians, the unity bond was a life-altering commitment, and Eli sensed that Kiera's doubts were not easily dismissed. He took a steadying breath, holding her gaze. "I understand the significance of this bond, and I'm prepared to face the unknown," he replied, his voice unwavering. "Earth and her people are committed to building trust, not just through words, but through shared experiences. Kira's expression softened, though her eyes remained sharp. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. "We shall see if your spirit is as steadfast as your words, Captain. The unity bond is a journey of endurance, both of mind and body. If you falter, the bond will break, and our alliance will be jeopardized." Eli nodded, aware of the pressure but resolute in his resolve. "I accept these terms, Princess Kira." With a graceful sweep of her hand, Kira gestured toward a circular platform at the room's center, where a shimmering, translucent field appeared, emanating a soft glow. "Step forward, Captain Morgan. Our ritual begins here." Eli approached the platform, feeling the eyes of every Larillian upon him. As he stepped onto the platform, the air grew thick, charged with energy. He focused on his breathing, keeping his mind steady, knowing that his inner thoughts would soon be laid bare. Kira joined him, her towering form beside him both comforting and daunting. She extended her hands, palms facing upward, and Eli mirrored her gesture. As their hands met, a surge of energy pulsed between them, warm and electric. In that instant, he felt a subtle shift, as though a barrier within him had begun to dissolve. Emotions and memories surfaced, fleeting images from his past. It was as if Kira could see through him, witnessing his triumphs, his fears, and the moments that had shaped him. In the depths of his mind, he sensed Kira's presence, calm, powerful, and observant. Their minds touched, and a flood of alien thoughts and sensations poured into him, each one both foreign and oddly familiar. He glimpsed fragments of her life, a Larillian city bathed in twilight, towering spires reaching toward the heavens, the faces of her people, and the ancient wisdom passed down through her ancestors. Kira's voice, clear and resonant, echoed within his thoughts. "You are bold, Captain, but boldness alone will not sustain you in the face of what lies ahead." Eli responded silently, his thoughts directed toward her. "Boldness may be the beginning, but resilience will see me through." He felt a slight shift in her emotions, a hint of respect mingled with caution. Their bond strengthened with each passing moment, and he sensed her probing deeper, testing his limits. Kira's mind reached for memories he had long buried, and he struggled to keep them hidden. But the bond demanded honesty, and he knew he couldn't hold back. Images from his past surfaced against his will, a childhood filled with hardship, a loss of loved ones, moments of fear and doubt that he had locked away. He braced himself, feeling vulnerable under Kira's gaze. Yet, instead of judgment, he sensed an unexpected empathy from her, as though she, too, understood the pain of loss. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kira broke the connection, withdrawing her hands. Eli gasped, feeling the void left by her departure. His heart pounded as he adjusted to the sudden emptiness, and he realized just how profound their exchange had been. Kira regarded him silently, her violet eyes softened with newfound understanding. "You have shown great resilience, Captain," she said quietly. "You carry burdens, but you bear them with strength. Perhaps you are not as different from us as I once believed." Eli met her gaze, feeling a surge of relief and mutual respect. "Thank you, Princess Kira. It is an honor to earn your trust." As the council murmured in approval, Kira extended her hand once more, this time in a gesture of camaraderie. "The unity bond has only begun, Captain Morgan. There is much more to learn and much more to test." With a steadying breath, Eli clasped her hand, sensing the road ahead was fraught with challenge and mystery. But in that moment, he was ready to face it, no longer just as a representative of Earth, but as a partner in a bond that would shape the future of both their worlds. Trials of the Unity Bond. The Unity Bond ritual was far from a single swift encounter. It required a series of tests, both mental and physical, designed to push both participants to their limits. For the Larillians, this journey was as sacred as it was transformative, an act that bound two souls beyond the confines of species or understanding. Each trial was meant to strip away the outer layers, exposing the true essence of each participant. Eli knew that he was about to face something beyond any challenge he had experienced before, but he couldn't have anticipated just how profound the trials would be. The following morning, Captain Eli Morgan arrived at the ceremonial training hall, his mind prepared as much as it could be. As he entered, he noticed that Kiera was already there, her towering form poised and centered, her eyes closed in meditation. The hall was enormous, its walls etched with ancient Larillian symbols that shimmered faintly under the cool lighting. The air itself felt dense with history and significance. The rituals conducted here had bound countless pairs across Larillian history, yet Eli was the first human ever permitted to take part. Kiera opened her eyes and acknowledged him with a slight nod. "Captain Morgan," she began, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to echo off the hall's high ceilings. "Today marks the beginning of the trials. These tests will examine not only your strength but your resolve, your empathy, and your willingness to confront uncomfortable truths." Eli nodded, his expression resolute. "I understand, Princess Kiera. I'm ready to face whatever challenges come our way." She watched him intently, her violet gaze piercing. "Your confidence is commendable, but remember, this journey requires more than strength of will. The first trial is called the Mirror of Minds. It's a test of perception and empathy. You will see into my mind as I will into yours. This experience is not to be taken lightly. What you witness may shift your very sense of self." Eli took a deep breath, bracing himself. "I'm prepared." Kiera guided him to a circular platform at the center of the hall, a raised dais surrounded by softly glowing stones. As they took their positions, she placed her hands on his shoulders, and he mirrored her gesture, feeling a pulse of energy emanate from her touch. The stones around them began to emit a faint hum, resonating with a frequency that seemed to bypass the senses and reach directly into the mind. "Close your eyes," Kiera instructed, her voice gentle yet firm. As he obeyed, he felt a warmth spread from her hands into his body, a strange but calming sensation. Gradually, he sensed his consciousness expanding, stretching beyond the limits of his physical form. He could feel Kiera's presence, her thoughts brushing against his, tentative at first, but growing stronger. Their minds connected, a surge of thoughts and images pouring through the link. Ellie's mind was suddenly flooded with memories from Kiera's past. He saw fragments of her life, moments of her rigorous training, long hours spent honing her skills as both a warrior and diplomat, the pressures of leadership as a member of Larillian royalty. He glimpsed her childhood in the sprawling crystalline city of Solithra, nestled between towering mountains under the pale lavender skies of her home planet. Through her memories, he could feel the pride and expectations placed upon her shoulders, the unyielding discipline that had shaped her into the person she was. Amidst these scenes, he caught flashes of moments she had carefully hidden away, fragments of vulnerability and pain. He saw her standing alone in the royal courtyard, looking up at the sky, her expression conflicted. He sensed the weight of isolation, the struggles she faced in carrying her responsibilities, and the moments of doubt she concealed behind her strong, stoic exterior. In that brief exchange, he understood her in ways he hadn't anticipated. Beneath her formidable exterior was a person who carried the same loneliness, the same longing for connection that he did. And then the current shifted. Eli felt Kiera exploring his own memories. He tried to hold back, an instinctive desire to protect the most sensitive parts of himself, but the ritual demanded openness, and he let his guard fall. Images of his past surfaced, his childhood on Earth, the loss of his father, the moments of triumph and failure that had shaped him. He felt her witnessing his struggles, his mistakes, and the scars they had left. One memory lingered longer than the rest, a moment he rarely revisited. It was during his first interstellar mission, a high-stakes operation that had gone wrong, resulting in the loss of a friend and crewmate. The weight of that failure, the feeling of helplessness and grief, resurfaced, raw and unguarded. He sensed Kiera's reaction, a mixture of empathy and sullen respect. When he opened his eyes, Kiera's hands were still on his shoulders, her gaze softer, more understanding. She removed her hands, the connection between them slowly dissolving, leaving behind a sense of intimacy that was both profound and unsettling. "You carry much within you, Captain," she said quietly, her voice free from judgment. "More than I expected." Eli nodded, feeling the weight of the experience settle over him. "And you, Princess, you've known struggle as much as I have, perhaps even more." Kiera inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his words. "This trial is only the beginning. There are more challenges to come, each one meant to break down the barriers between us. The second trial, known as the Path of Trust, requires us to rely entirely on each other. For a human and a Larillian, this will be no easy task." Eli followed her down a passageway that led to a cavernous training room. The room was designed for the physical challenges of the Unity Bond, with a complex network of ropes, platforms, and obstacles stretching into the distance. In the center was a formidable obstacle course, lined with gaps, ledges, and shifting platforms that hovered above a misty, simulated abyss. Kiera explained, "The Path of Trust is designed to test our ability to work as one, with no room for doubt. One wrong move could lead to failure, and failure here would be dangerous. We must rely on each other's strengths and instincts." Eli took in the daunting course, feeling a thrill of excitement mixed with trepidation. "Understood. Let's get through this together." They stepped onto the first platform, and the ground immediately shifted beneath them, forcing Eli to grip Kiera's arm for balance. The Larillian princess moved with a practiced grace, guiding him through the initial stages, her movements precise and measured. He quickly realized that her strength lay not only in her physical power, but in her sense of stability and awareness. She anticipated each shift in the terrain, adjusting her stance and guiding him through each step. As they progressed deeper into the course, the challenges became increasingly complex. At one point, they reached a gap too wide to cross on their own, a distance that could only be bridged by a leap of faith. Kiera held out her hand, her gaze unwavering. "Trust me, Captain," she said, her voice steady. Eli hesitated only for a moment before clasping her hand. They leaped together, his heart racing as they soared over the chasm. For an instant, he felt weightless, suspended between uncertainty and trust. They landed safely on the other side, and he felt a surge of adrenaline and gratitude. Step by step, trial by trial, they made their way through the path of trust. Each obstacle required them to rely on each other, to communicate without words, to read each other's movements and intentions. The bond between them strengthened with every successful leap, every shared breath. By the time they reached the final platform, they stood side by side, breathing heavily, but with a newfound sense of unity. Kiera turned to him, a hint of a smile breaking through her usual stoic expression. "You have proven yourself, Captain. Few have endured the path of trust with such resilience." Eli met her gaze, feeling the warmth of her compliment. "And I wouldn't have made it through without you, Princess." They stood there in silence, a sense of accomplishment settling between them. This trial had stripped away any remaining doubts, forging a bond of respect and trust that went beyond words. But Eli knew that this was only the second trial. There were 5 more to come, each one promising to push them further, to break down any remaining barriers until they were as close to unity as 2 beings could be. As they made their way back, Eli felt a new determination ignite within him. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it, not just for humanity, but for the bond he was forging with Kiera. This was no longer merely a diplomatic mission. It was a journey that would redefine him, that would shape the future of Earth and Larillia alike. The depths of vulnerability. The path of trust had solidified a bond between Captain Eli Morgan and Princess Kiera, but the unity bond was far from complete. Each trial pushed them further into the depths of understanding, tearing down layers of identity, ego, and pretense until nothing but their truest selves remained. Eli could sense that they had crossed a threshold, no longer just partners of convenience. They were becoming allies, perhaps even something deeper. But he knew the coming trials would be harder still, demanding more than strength or trust. They would require vulnerability. The next morning, Eli met Kiera in the meditation hall. The room was dimly lit, with soft beams of light filtering through crystalline windows. At the center of the room was a pool of water, its surface perfectly still. Around the pool, delicate patterns of bioluminescent moss glowed faintly, casting the room in an ethereal blue hue. Kiera stood by the pool, her gaze thoughtful. She looked up as he approached, nodding in acknowledgement. "Captain Morven, today we begin the third trial. This is the trial of shadows." Eli regarded her with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. The trial of shadows. Kiera's expression softened, a flicker of empathy in her violet eyes. "This trial is not one of physical endurance or intellectual challenge. It is a journey into our own fears and hidden truths, a place where both of us must confront what we keep buried. In our culture, this is the hardest test, for it requires complete honesty with oneself." Eli's pulse quickened. He was no stranger to introspection, but he understood that the unity bond demanded a different level of self-awareness. Kiera gestured for him to sit at the edge of the pool, and he followed her lead, taking a seat beside her. Their reflections gazed back at them from the still surface, and Eli found himself unsettled by the notion of seeing himself through the eyes of this ritual. "Look into the water," she instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The pool will reveal your shadow, a reflection of the truths you avoid, the burdens you carry. You may see parts of yourself that you wish to forget, but remember, this is part of our bond. I will be here to witness, as you will be for me." Eli took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on his reflection. Gradually, the image began to waver, shifting and blurring, as though the water were alive, reacting to his gaze. The pool grew dark, and suddenly, scenes from his past flickered across the surface, moments he had tried to bury, memories he had fought to suppress. The first image was of his father, a decorated officer in the early days of humanity's expansion into space. Eli had idolized him, and his father's death during a military mission had shattered his young world. The pain of that loss flooded back, raw and piercing. He saw himself as a boy, standing by his mother's side, trying to hold back tears as the flag was draped over his father's coffin. The grief he had long buried surged to the surface, and he clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. He felt Kiera's presence beside him, her gaze steady but filled with quiet empathy. She saw it all, the way he had suppressed his grief, his attempt to become the perfect soldier, living up to the legacy his father had left. Her hand reached out, resting gently on his arm, grounding him. "Loss shapes us, but it does not define us," she murmured, her voice soft yet resolute. Eli nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He let the memory dissolve, releasing it into the stillness of the water. But the pool was not finished. Another scene surfaced, a mission gone wrong. He saw himself on a remote moon, surrounded by hostile forces. His team was pinned down, and in a desperate move, Eli had ordered an evacuation, leaving behind a crewmate who hadn't made it to the extraction point in time. The guilt of that decision lingered, gnawing at him, a reminder of the lives he couldn't save. Kiera's gaze was unwavering as she watched, absorbing his pain without judgment. "You carry guilt," she said quietly. "But survival in battle is not always fair, nor is it always just. Each choice you made to save lives." Eli closed his eyes, breathing deeply. He had never spoken about that mission, never allowed himself to confront the consequences of his decision. But here, under Kiera's watchful presence, he felt a sliver of release, an acknowledgement that he couldn't change the past, but he could carry it forward as a lesson rather than a burden. After a moment, he opened his eyes, and Kiera nodded slightly, as if sensing his acceptance. Then, without a word, she leaned over the water herself. Eli sensed her hesitation, the momentary tightening of her hands. He'd understood. For someone as disciplined as Kiera, exposing her inner struggles was no easy task. The pool began to reflect her own memories. Eli saw a younger version of Kiera, training rigorously in the art of combat and diplomacy. Her life had been one of duty, structured and disciplined. But beneath her strength, there was a flicker of something else, a moment of vulnerability. He glimpsed her at a younger age, standing alone on a cliff overlooking her home city, the weight of her responsibilities bearing down on her. He saw the isolation that came with her role, the constant pressure to be perfect, to live up to her title and serve her people without falter. Kiera's hand tightened slightly as she recalled the image, and Eli sensed the depth of her solitude, the sacrifices she had made to maintain her position as a pillar of her society. She had been trained to hide her emotions, to be impenetrable, but here, in this ritual, she allowed herself to be seen. For a long moment, they sat in silence, watching their memories ripple across the water, each scene a fragment of the lives they had lived, the burdens they had borne. Finally, Kiera turned to him, her expression vulnerable but resolute. "Every leader, every warrior carries a shadow," she said, her voice steady. "In our culture, acknowledging one's shadow is the first step toward true strength. Only by accepting what lies within can we truly understand one another." Eli nodded, feeling a profound sense of respect for her. They had both laid bare their vulnerabilities, sharing the parts of themselves they had hidden for so long. It was a strange, almost sacred bond that had formed, a bond that felt stronger than any oath or alliance. As they rose from the pool, the glow of the bioluminescent moss brightened, as though reacting to the ritual's success. Kiera led him back to the center of the room, where they stood face to face, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "This trial has marked a new chapter in our bond," Captain Kiera said. "We have seen each other's shadows, and yet we stand here, unbroken. That is a testament to the strength of our unity." Eli met her gaze, feeling a surge of gratitude and admiration. "I don't know what lies ahead, but I know now that I don't face it alone. Whatever comes, I'm ready." Kiera's expression softened, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Neither of us stands alone any longer. But there is more to this journey. The next trials will test our understanding of one another, our ability to bridge the vast gulf between our cultures, and it will demand all the strength we've built here." She led him through a narrow corridor, illuminated by faint blue lights that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The air grew colder as they descended, the walls narrowing as they approached a small chamber. Inside, they found 2 pedestals, each topped with a glowing orb. Kiera explained, "This is the Chamber of Resonance. Each orb contains the essence of our cultural histories, the memories of our ancestors, and the values that define us. The final trials will require us to understand one another's past as deeply as our own. Only then can we truly merge, and only then can we hope to succeed in forming the unity bond." Eli studied the orb on his pedestal, a vibrant, swirling blue that seemed to contain entire worlds within its depths. Kiera's orb was a deep amethyst, shifting with shadows and light. He sensed the weight of their ancestors' memories within these orbs, the stories and struggles that had shaped both of their civilizations. This was not just about 2 individuals. It was about the merging of 2 legacies, 2 ways of life. They each reached out to touch their respective orbs. As his fingers brushed against the cool surface, Eli felt a wave of energy surge through him. Memories not his own flashed before his eyes, scenes of Earth's early days in space, humanity's first contact with other species, and the countless sacrifices made to expand into the galaxy. He understood, in an instant, that this bond was more than a diplomatic gesture. It was a merging of identities, a mutual understanding forged by the experiences of 2 worlds. Kiera's hand hovered over her orb, and she met his gaze. "Together we will complete this bond, not as representatives of our races, but as allies bound by something greater." Eli nodded, feeling the magnitude of their journey. They stood at the edge of an alliance that could reshape both their worlds. In that moment, he realized that they were no longer 2 separate beings bound by duty. They were partners on a journey that transcended space and time, each willing to lay bare their strengths, weaknesses, and shadows for the sake of unity. As they left the chamber, Ely felt a renewed sense of purpose. There would be more trials, more challenges that would test them to their core. But he knew, now more than ever, that he was ready to face whatever lay ahead, with Kiera by his side. The bridge of cultures. The trial of shadows had forged a new depth of understanding between Captain Ely Morgan and Princess Kiera, but their journey was far from over. The unity bond, as they had come to understand, was not merely a series of personal tests. It was a path designed to bring two lives, and more significantly, two cultures, into harmony. The next phase of their journey, the trial of cultures, required them to immerse themselves in each other's history, values, and perspectives. It was a bridge that would demand empathy, curiosity, and the willingness to see the universe through each other's eyes. As they entered the chamber of resonance once again, the orbs on the pedestals seemed to hum in anticipation. Each orb, they had learned, held the essence of their cultural heritage. Every moment of triumph, struggle, wisdom, and sacrifice was preserved within, a living repository of history and identity. Today, they would each delve into the other's heritage, absorbing the collective memory of their people and finding common ground in the differences. Kiera placed a hand on her own orb, her gaze steady as she regarded Ely. "Captain Morgan, are you prepared to take on this responsibility? The trial of cultures requires us to open ourselves completely to each other's past. To understand my people, you must allow our histories and values to become a part of you." Ely felt the weight of her words, the solemnity of what they were about to undertake. "I'm ready, Princess Kiera," he replied, his voice unwavering. "It's an honor to be entrusted with the history of your people, just as it is my honor to share mine with you." Kiera inclined her head, her violet eyes softening with something that could have been respect, perhaps even kinship. She gestured for him to place his hand on her orb, and in turn, she rested her palm against his. The energy within the orbs flared, light and shadow swirling as if coming to life, and Ely felt a rush of sensations flood through him. As the connection between them strengthened, his mind was flooded with images and sensations from Kiera's past. He was no longer just observing her memories. He was experiencing them, seeing the world as she had seen it, feeling the emotions she had felt. He found himself standing in a vast, breathtaking city of crystalline spires and shimmering bridges, the capital of Lyrilia. The city pulsed with life, its streets bustling with Lyrillian citizens dressed in flowing silver and blue robes. The architecture was unlike anything Ely had ever seen, with buildings crafted from materials that glowed softly in the sunlight, giving the city an ethereal quality. He marveled at the fluidity of their design, the harmonious blend of nature and civilization, as though the city itself was a living entity. In the midst of this wonder, he felt Kiera's presence guiding him, showing him the heartbeat of her people. He saw their traditions unfold, from the intricate ceremonial dances that celebrated the cycles of their twin moons, to the rituals that honored their ancestors, and the endless quest for knowledge that defined Lyrillian culture. The Lyrillians believed that each person was a link in a chain, connected not only to their past, but to the future generations who would carry their legacy forward. This perspective imbued every action, every word, with purpose and intention. As the memories continued, he experienced a day in Kiera's life as a young student of the arts of diplomacy and combat. He felt the weight of expectations, the pride and pressure of her lineage, the rigorous training that pushed her to the brink of her abilities. He experienced her triumphs and failures, the moments of doubt that were quickly masked by duty. For the first time, he truly understood the sacrifices she had made, the identity she had crafted to be the princess her people needed. A shift in perspective brought him to a time of crisis in Lyrillian history. He felt the cold fear of an ancient threat, a ruthless species known as the Quora, who had once nearly driven the Lyrillians to extinction. He sensed the desperation of that time, the unity that had risen among her people as they fought not just to survive, but to preserve the values and wisdom they held sacred. In those moments, Ely felt himself filled with a fierce respect for Kiera's people, understanding how their resilience and unity had forged a civilization as beautiful as it was powerful. Gradually, the memories began to fade, and Ely opened his eyes, feeling as if he had lived another life within those few minutes. He looked at Kiera, and for the first time, he could see the fullness of her identity, not just a warrior or diplomat, but a guardian of a legacy built on sacrifice, wisdom, and hope. Kiera gave him a moment to absorb what he had experienced, then extended her hand to his orb. Now, Captain, I will experience the world as you have known it. Share with me the spirit of your people. Ely nodded, feeling the familiar weight of his own orb as he guided her hand to its surface. The orb responded, and he watched as Kiera's expression shifted, her eyes closing as she absorbed the memories within. Moments later, she was on Earth, standing in the bustling streets of a city filled with energy and innovation. She saw towering skyscrapers of steel and glass, the marvels of human engineering that seemed to touch the sky. She felt the pulse of human ambition, the drive to push beyond limits, to create, to achieve. She saw children in playgrounds, families sharing laughter, artists and musicians expressing the vibrant diversity of Earth's many cultures. She sensed a paradox in humanity, a people both fierce and gentle, capable of destruction but driven by a desire to protect, explore, and learn. Through Ellie's memories, she experienced Earth's triumphs and tragedies, the struggles for freedom, the resilience that defined humanity in the face of adversity. She saw wars fought to protect ideals, revolutions that reshaped nations, and the quiet moments of peace that bound people together. She felt the grief of lost soldiers, the pride of victories hard won, and the joy of discoveries that pushed the boundaries of what was known. Then came humanity's first steps into space, the early voyages to the Moon, the mission to Mars, the establishment of Earth's first space colonies. She saw humanity's hunger for knowledge, the way they reached beyond the stars, searching for connection, for answers to questions that had shaped their civilization since its earliest days. Finally, she felt Ellie's own struggles, the weight of his duty, the ache of losses endured. She saw his determination to prove himself, the loyalty he held for those he commanded, and the quiet yearning for something greater, something meaningful that transcended the demands of duty. When Kiera opened her eyes, there was a new depth in her gaze. She looked at Ely with a profound understanding, as though seeing him not just as a man, but as a reflection of the vast, complex world he had come from. "Your people are remarkable, Ellie," she said softly, her voice filled with respect. "You have endured so much, yet you continue to seek out new frontiers, to learn, to grow. There is a strength in humanity that is unlike any I have known." Ely met her gaze, feeling a strange sense of unity. "And your people, Kiera, the resilience, the beauty, the wisdom your culture has preserved. I feel privileged to know it, to understand even a fraction of what makes your civilization so incredible." For a long moment, they stood in silence, two individuals bound by a connection that went beyond words. This trial, the trial of cultures, had bridged the vast chasm between them, showing them that while their worlds were different, the values they cherished, honor, resilience, curiosity, and unity, were deeply shared. Finally, Kiera extended her hand, palm up, and Ely took it, clasping her hand in a gesture of mutual respect. "Today, we have forged more than a bond between two people," she said, her voice steady. "We have built a bridge between two civilizations. Together, we carry the weight of our people's histories, and we do so with a commitment to protect what makes us unique." Ely nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. "Whatever trials lie ahead, we'll face them together." Kiera's expression softened, a hint of a smile breaking through her usual composure. "There is more to this journey, Captain. The final trials will test the endurance of this bond, the depth of our unity, but I believe that we are ready." As they left the chamber of resonance, a newfound sense of unity filled the space between them. They were no longer simply representatives of Earth and Lyrilia. They were bearers of their culture's legacies, bonded by a shared purpose that would drive them forward. They knew that the path would not be easy, that the trials to come would demand everything they had. But they also knew that, together, they could face whatever awaited them. The journey they had embarked upon was no longer about duty alone. It was about the possibility of a future where two civilizations could unite, where differences were a source of strength, not division. As they walked side by side, Ely felt a new fire within him, a determination to see this unity bond through, not just for Earth, but for something far greater, a chance to create a new legacy, one built on understanding, respect, and the belief that even the vastest gulfs could be bridged. The trial of endurance. After the trial of cultures, Ely and Kiera felt more unified than ever, but they both knew that the hardest trials still lay ahead. The bond they had built was strong, yet it was about to be tested in a way that would push them to their physical, mental, and emotional limits. This next trial, known as the trial of endurance, would strip away any remaining comfort, exposing them to their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. It would demand they hold on to their trust in one another, even when faced with their breaking points. Ely and Kiera met in a stark, metallic chamber located in the lower levels of the Larillian training complex. Unlike the serene spaces they had encountered in previous trials, this room had a cold, almost clinical atmosphere. Large metal doors lined the walls, and an array of holographic screens displayed various environmental simulations, each one more daunting than the last. Kiera turned to Ellie, her face unreadable, but her posture rigid. The trial of endurance requires that we face environments designed to break our resolve. Each simulation will challenge us differently, testing both our physical stamina and our mental resilience. Only by working together can we withstand these trials. Ely nodded, mentally bracing himself. I'm ready. Whatever these simulations throw at us, we'll face them together. Kiera approached a central control panel, inputting a series of commands. A hum filled the room as the simulations initialized, and the first metallic door slid open, revealing a dark passage. She gestured for him to follow, and they stepped into the unknown. As soon as they entered, the temperature plummeted. A bone-chilling cold enveloped them, and Ely's breath became visible in the freezing air. They were standing in what appeared to be an Arctic landscape, a vast, snow-covered wasteland under a starless sky. The wind howled, carrying sharp particles of ice that stung as they lashed against their exposed skin. Kiera activated the neural synchronization band on her wrist, a device that linked their physiological states, allowing them to monitor each other's vital signs. Our survival depends on maintaining a steady pace, she said, her voice muffled by the sound of the wind. This environment is designed to wear us down slowly. We must conserve our energy. Ely nodded, though he could already feel the cold biting into his bones. They set off across the frozen landscape, trudging through snow that reached up to their knees, their every step a struggle against the unforgiving elements. Time lost meaning as they pressed forward, the landscape stretching endlessly before them with no sign of shelter. Each breath felt like shards of glass in Ely's lungs, and his fingers began to numb despite the thermal layers he wore. Hours seemed to pass, and the cold became a relentless enemy, its icy fingers clawing at their resolve. Ely's muscles ached, his limbs growing heavy with fatigue. He glanced at Kiera, who walked with her head held high, her gaze focused ahead. She, too, was visibly affected. Her skin, normally a vibrant blue, had paled, and her movements were slower, more deliberate. At one point he stumbled, his knees buckling under the strain, but Kiera was there in an instant, gripping his arm and steadying him. You must not falter, Ellie, she said firmly, though there was an unmistakable gentleness in her tone. We're nearly through this stage. Ely forced himself to his feet, gritting his teeth against the cold and pain. They continued, step by step, until finally the landscape began to shift, the cold receding as the simulation transformed. The next environment was even more brutal, a scorching desert, the sun blazing overhead, its heat oppressive and unrelenting. Sand dunes stretched as far as the eye could see, and the air shimmered with heat waves. Sweat immediately began to pour down Ellie's face, his throat parched and dry. The abrupt shift from freezing cold to intense heat was almost unbearable, and his body struggled to adjust. Kiera handed him a small container of water, her own face flushed from the heat. "We must ration this carefully," she said, her voice strained. "This desert simulation will test our endurance to dehydration and exhaustion. It will try to weaken us gradually, playing on our need for relief." Eli nodded, taking a small sip and feeling the water soothe his throat for a brief moment before the drainers returned. They trudged onward, each step a struggle against the sand that shifted beneath their feet. The heat bore down on them, relentless, and their movements became slower as their bodies grew heavy with fatigue. Hours passed, each one more grueling than the last. The sun seemed to hang in the sky, unyielding, and the landscape offered no reprieve. Their pace slowed, their strength dwindling as the sun drained their energy. Ellie's vision began to blur, spots dancing before his eyes. He stumbled again, feeling himself start to fall. But once more, Kiera was there, catching him before he hit the ground. She looked into his eyes, her gaze fierce and determined. "Remember why we're here, Eli. Remember the bond we've built. You're not alone." Her words rekindled a spark within him, and he managed to stand, summoning the last reserves of his strength. Together, they pressed on, leaning on each other, refusing to yield to the merciless heat. Eventually, the desert faded, and they found themselves in a new environment. This time, they were surrounded by towering cliffs and narrow pathways carved into a rocky mountain. A fierce wind whipped through the canyons, creating a treacherous path that demanded their utmost focus. This trial was less about endurance and more about precision and trust. The narrow ledges and sharp drops left no room for error. One misstep could send them plummeting into the abyss below. The gusts of wind tested their balance, forcing them to lean on each other as they navigated the perilous cliffs. At one particularly narrow section, Kiera went ahead, extending her hand to Eli. He hesitated, the height dizzying, but her steady gaze anchored him. "Trust me," she said, her voice a calm anchor amidst the howling wind. Taking a deep breath, he grasped her hand, allowing her to guide him across. Step by step, they inched forward, each movement calculated and precise. Eli could feel the strength in Kiera's grip, a silent reminder that she would not let him fall. They reached the other side, and he exhaled, his heart pounding with relief and gratitude. The landscape shifted once more, bringing them to the final environment, a dense, labyrinthine forest cloaked in fog and shadows. The trees twisted and loomed over them, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that seeped into the bones, amplifying every small sound. Here, it was not physical endurance they were testing, but mental resilience. The fog disoriented them, making it difficult to tell which way they were going. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of their vision, figures that vanished when they turned to look. Every so often, Eli felt a chill run down his spine, the sensation of being watched. The simulation was designed to tap into their deepest fears, feeding on doubt and uncertainty. After what felt like hours of wandering through the fog, they came to a crossroads, with multiple paths stretching out before them, each one disappearing into the mist. Eli looked at Kiera, uncertainty gnawing at him. "Which way do we go?" Kiera closed her eyes, centering herself. "This trial is meant to test our connection," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we trust in the bond we've built, we'll find our way through." Eli took a deep breath, reaching out to her. They clasped hands, grounding themselves in each other's presence. They chose a path and moved forward, letting intuition guide them, trusting in the connection that had grown through each trial. Together, they navigated the winding paths, their trust unshaken. At last, the fog began to thin, the oppressive silence lifting. They emerged from the forest, stepping into a clearing where the final gate awaited them. Beyond it lay the exit, the end of the trial of endurance. As they passed through the gate, Eli felt a wave of relief wash over him, his body exhausted but his spirit intact. He looked at Kiera, her face pale and drawn but her gaze unwavering. They had endured together, each trial strengthening the bond between them, forging something unbreakable. Kiera met his gaze, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We have endured, Eli, not as separate beings, but as one." Eli nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. "I couldn't have made it through without you, Kiera. I know now that this bond we've built, it's more than just an alliance. It's a part of me, a part of who we are together." They stood in silence, each of them changed, the bond between them solidified through the fires of endurance. This trial had tested the very core of their unity, and they had emerged stronger, bound by a connection that transcended words and rituals. As they left the chamber, a quiet understanding passed between them. They had endured together, not just for the sake of their people, but for something deeper, something that bound them in a way neither could fully explain. They had become more than allies, more than friends. They were two souls, united by purpose, strengthened by trust, and ready to face whatever lay ahead. And as they walked side by side, they knew that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, unyielding, bonded by a strength that no trial could ever break.